Hey guys, welcome back to another video. I guess this is going to complete out my discussion on Supergirl because I've done 3 videos up until this point. This included regarding Supergirl. Did a review for it. I talked about how I would have personally have done, fix the film. And now we just got an article from Hollywood Reporter that pretty much details, all the stuff that happened behind the scenes and confirming a lot of the rumors that we have been hearing about, regarding this film. So I want to read this to a few guys. I already read this, and I just kind of want to just look at this, and talk about what happened and what went wrong with this film. So let's take a look here. So it reads. Usually test scores go up, up, and away, but this March, the scores for Supergirl actually went down when DC Studios held a bake-off, testing competing cuts from filmmaker Craig Gillespie and from the studio run by James Gunn and Peter Safran. It was a moment of extreme disappointment for those involved, as the stakes were high, particularly for DC. Supergirl would be a key test for the WB division as its first feature not written and directed by Gunn following last year's inaugural outing, Superman. It needed to work to prove the studio could expand beyond projects directed by Gunn, the A-list filmmaker behind Guardians of the Galaxy, Peacemaker, and Suicide Squad, and the very public face of said brand. Months later, the Supergirl outcome is now well known. The movie, starring Amelia Alcock as the title character and budgeted around $170 million to $180 million, crashed and burned on its opening weekend, grossing $37.1 million, which is even lower than Joker Folie à Deux, which opened at $37.6 million. And that was not made by Gunn and Safran. They were not involved in that. But here's where we get to the juicy bits. So here's where all the juicy bits start. So Gunn and Gillespie, who's the credited director of this movie, they had creative differences over the direction of the movie, numerous sources tell the Hollywood Reporter, and the film never found its footing in the post-production process. The test scores, which are counted on a scale out of 100 points, never escaped the 60s. So basically, people who watched this were saying, it's all right, but it's not particularly good. Another insider said the movie's top score was 70. So, and we'll get to that in a second because that actually is very interesting as we read here. But when one insider states that, quote, they were not creatively aligned is the polite way of describing things. So this is not an incident where it's just normal creative differences, right? That usually happens a lot of times on films where people are willing to make compromises or they just step away from the project. This seems to be a lot more scrutiny involved here. So other insiders dispute this characterization, saying that Gunn, Safran, and Gillespie had the normal amount of healthy friction any filmmaker in a studio have as part of the process of making a movie better. And multiple sources say the duo being Gunn and Safran, respect the filmmaking chops of Gillespie, known for guiding Margot Robbie to an Oscar nomination for I, Tonya, yada yada yada. Filming wrapped in May 2025, and as early as the fall of that year, the studio and Gillespie knew the movie wasn't working. After a December test screening proved to be just okay, the studio decided to take matters into its own hands and took charge of the post-production to make its own cut. So this is what they mean by competing cuts. So we have basically the director's cut, and we had a studio cut, basically the one helmed by James Gunn. The studio also enlisted writer Jeremy Slater, a James Gunn favorite, who previously wrote an unmade feature based on the DC superhero team, The Authority. So that film is at this point canceled. As some people are saying, it was maybe happening or not, but it seems like now it's canceled. To help with the post-production process. The extent of Slater's involvement is unclear, although it seems he helped write scenes for a 9-day shoot of additional photography. Original screenwriter Anna Gora, sorry if I mispronounced her name, probably did, remained involved in the post production process as well. One issue at play was the climactic fight, which was reconfigured. Other issues with the movie are unclear, though, but it is known that music was a key friction point. From his first Guardians movie onwards, James Gunn has established himself as the master of the movie soundtrack and the all important needle drop, earning praise for finding the right song and dropping it at the right time. Gillespie also has a reputation for melding music to movies, as seen in Cruella. So, so they had issues between the two of them on what songs basically they wanted to have for specifically as you read this climactic fight, and just that was becoming a point of friction between the two of them. The movie had at least 4 test screenings, according to sources, with screenings held in December 2025, as well as February and March of this year. And while social media users and critics are dunking on the movie's use of a cover of the Jimmy Eat World song "The Middle," the big needle drop in the final set piece, uh, which I just, like I said, I found it very out of place personally. Um, At a February screening, there was actually a cover version of Cyndi Lauper's "Girls Just Want to Have Fun." That song choice came from Gunn, but it was ultimately abandoned for the Jimmy Eat World cover. So James Gunn proposed this song, right? He proposed this song, and I'm not sure who proposed this one. From what I've read, James Gunn also proposed this one. So this wasn't exactly Gillespie's choice. This was Gunn's decision. Regardless, it was going to be Gunn's. So so there's that. The movie employed 2 editors. There was Tatiana S. Regal, Gillespie's longtime post partner, who edited Lars and the Real Girl, I, Tonya, and Cruella. And then there was Fred Raskin, Gunn's longtime cutter, who worked on all the Guardians of the Galaxy movies, as well as Peacemaker. Raskin is also Quentin Tarantino's go-to editor. He was brought on later in the process and proved a key instrument in the studio's slowly heavying hand. So, further illustrating again that Gunn wanted to do something of his own accord, and Gillespie had his own cut. So you could see where things are, starting to, fall apart. There were signs that things were getting better. Deep into winter, basically around December, test scores improved and hit the low 70s. So whatever cut they had in December of 2025 had this score attached to it. So this was the highest that Supergirl ever got, was a 70. However, rather than continuing to tinker away on that cut, the studio decided to force a bake-off by creating 2 cuts, one by Gillespie and one by the studio. I guarantee you, I feel it in my heart. I guarantee you that this score that was given to that specific cut, I'm telling you, is probably Gillespie's cut. Guarantee you, it's Gillespie's cut, um, and that's ridiculous. It seems like James Gunn wanted what he wanted, and well, as you're about to see here, he got his wish. Uh, It's unclear what major differences emerged, but one source says Gillespie's version was 11 minutes longer and featured more. So yeah, so it's more of what I said. So this is more than likely Gillespie's cut, based on what I'm reading here. It is unclear what major differences emerged, but one source said Gillespie's version was 11 minutes longer and featured more of the villain Krim, played by Matthias uh, Saru something. Sorry. Yeah, my bad. Sorry, someone was just calling me. Um, when the 2 competing versions tested, the scores surprisingly dropped significantly, although the studio's version inched out ahead of Gillespie's, but by only 2 points according to sources. So basically, it's the same fucking score. That's just because you scored a little bit higher doesn't mean you're all of a sudden a much better movie. Gillespie's version scored strongly on song choices, pacing, and villain. Eking out a win, even a middling one, the studio chose its own cut as the one to go into theaters. A studio insider says the differences were not particularly pronounced. So essentially, what you have here, guys, is a James Gunn muscling his way into this and wanting to, make changes as he saw fit, to the point where he developed his own cut with his own people, and that's the version that they ended up going with. That's not particularly cool. That's not particularly cool, especially if this score here, before they decided to go to two different cuts, because just so you understand, this what the fuck? Sorry, this 70 is representative of their first cut. That's what I'm believing that this is, right? Their first or second cut. And then after that, they decided to go ahead and do two different things, two different cuts. And those shits went down. So y'all had it. You had something better at the start, but then you guys decided to go fuck off and do two different things, and no one's able to communicate and work together. Therefore, the quality then takes further a dip. So, yeah, no. Studio insiders paint the back and forth process as routine, but others, including one franchise filmmaker who spoke anonymously for the story and was not involved with Supergirl, held the opposite view. He says, quote, "It happens more than you think, but it's not normal. If a studio is going to put money into the test process, it means they feel strongly about certain things." The movie was never tested again as a point of comparison. The canceled Batgirl and the box office disappointment Shazam! Fury of the Gods both tested in the 60s, like most of Supergirl's tests as well. And from that point on, if Gillespie believed strongly that something should be in the movie, he had to advocate it, said one source. So, yeah, dude, sounds like his film got taken away from him. It sounds like his film was ultimately taken away, and I think that that is very disappointing. I think that, when you hire on talent, right? I mean, I understand ultimately, as James Gunn's position, I understand him being the producer. Ultimately, he has the final say. And some people may, conflate that, saying, "Oh no, it's the director." It's like, no, it's very special treatment in those departments. If you negotiate for final say on, the cut and for all those other factors, then sure, then that's your territory. But a lot of these times, producers have that final say. So ultimately, even though they were having this fucking stupid competition, I don't understand why they were competing against each other. It's like you guys are working on this, and you had a cut that you guys worked on together that scored better than the other cuts, than your individual cuts. It's like, I don't understand. So, like, what it sounds like to me ultimately is that James Gunn did not like the direction of this film, and he wanted to make his own personal changes. And instead of collaborating with the filmmaker, he just decided, you know what? No, I'm going to do my own thing. And yeah, there are creative differences, but ultimately, you guys got to find a compromise, especially if you guys are working together, right? Because look at Supergirl. Supergirl is all around a failure, a massive, massive failure. It's going to lose the company hundreds of millions of dollars. And there is a vision there. If you watch my video about my pitch, it's like there is something plausible. You can make something out of this movie, but clearly they could never find that movie because they were just dicking around. And they had a version that was better. They said the movie's top score was 70, and then they said here they held a test screening. And oh fuck me, they held a test screening. Where the fuck did it go? They held a test screening December of 2025, deep into winter, December 2025. The highest that they ever got was the low 70s. So you had a cut, right? You had a cut, right? So, and this was after, working with people and stuff like that. So, um, so then what happens? You don't work on that cut anymore, and then you decide to do two different cuts, and then ultimately whatever it was that came out of this and James Gunn's take over here, that one scores a little bit better comparatively between these two, and completely disregarding what happened here and just going with what James Gunn got over here. That to me is just very problematic and also very dictating and dominating. Like that is not a great way to collaborate. You had a cut that was better. It scored better. Okay, you should have worked on that one. So that's where you fucked up. So either James Gunn was having the issues and he brought him on, or Giltsby was being stubborn. It's obviously these heads were not working. So yeah, man, it kind of reminds me of a little bit of the Fantastic Four situation from 2015. Where we were hearing about all these things about Josh Trank's movie, being fucked with, and then the studio was saying, "Hey, let's do this or let's do that," and what came out came out. So yeah, so it's very unfortunate to know that all those rumors are basically true, and that it just I to me it sounds like this is a James Gunn issue because it seems like when they were working together, something was working, but then someone decided, hey, let's just try two different cuts and see what happened, and I'm guaranteeing you that that's James Gunn's decision, so or at least someone in his vicinity. So yeah, I James Gunn probably is, I think on one level stole this movie from his own director, and I think also fucked it up. So that is really unfortunate. At least that's how it sounds like to me. But you guys let me know your thoughts on all of this stuff that just came out. And I think this will be the last video I make on Supergirl, just because, just there's a lot of stuff that came with the story. And, now knowing everything that happened behind the scenes, it's very clear to me that, that it's, they, like it says that they knew for months. The writing was on the wall for months. They knew this film was flawed and that ultimately it is what it is. Because they can't be spending more money because then they would lose more money when this thing bombs, right? Or were to come out, right? So, but let me know all your thoughts in the comment section below. And that's gonna be it for this video, guys. Thank you guys for tuning in. And until then, I will catch you guys in the next video. Bye.